class yesterday about territoriality and proxemics, and we got a whole bunch of notes about both of those, right? And I think I left both essay questions on. I know I left one of them on there, the one I told you would definitely be on there about proxemics. Okay, 5. Remember I said I gave you the 10-point essay question on proxemics? What were the 3 things that I said you needed to know about proxemics?
Space, personal space,
okay, you need to know the 4 personal distances: intimate, personal, social, and public. You need to know invasion, invitation, that concept, and be able to explain what that means, and the fight or flight, be able to describe the fight or flight response under proxemics. Territoriality, you need to know that it's the communication of ownership or possession of space and area. And I want you to know that these are the larger areas, the areas where we live, work, and play. That should be in your answer on territoriality. The areas where we live, work, and play. Bigger usually translates to better when it comes to territoriality. You have that in your notes, you should. And then the 3 types of markers under territoriality. So we covered a lot of information under both of these. You should have all of that in your notes and ready to go. Okay, so we can pick up now with number 6. Number 6, under the 11 types of nonverbal communication, is called haptics. Does anyone know how we communicate through haptics? What is that word referring to? What does that term refer to? You saw it in your chapter, didn't you? Yeah. Haptics means touch. Sometimes it's called tactile communication, communicating through touch. Here's another type of nonverbal communication that's getting an awful lot of attention today. On the morning show at the radio station, they were talking about an article, I'm trying to remember, I think it was in the Huffington Post, about hugs in the workplace and how it's not appropriate to hug in the workplace. A lot of attention to haptics because we are social creatures and we communicate a lot through touching. It's part of what we do as social creatures, but because haptics and tactile communication is extremely rule governed, of all the types of nonverbal communication that we've talked about, tactile communication or touch communication is probably the most rule governed. And what I mean by that is that we have pretty strict expectations as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in our culture, in our society. And you can face some pretty tough penalties if you break those expectations. If a teacher, for example, inappropriately, or is judged to be inappropriate, touching a student. When my mom and dad were in Michigan, we went up to see them one summer, and I was reading, I think it was a Lansing newspaper. And there was a story in there about a youth pastor at a church who and these were young kids, like elementary school kids. They went to a camp or they went on some kind of field trip. And he was in the church parking lot. The parents were coming to pick up the kids. They were getting off the church bus, like a school bus. And he stood at the bottom step he stood at the bottom step on the parking lot helping the little kids off the school bus as they would get down. They were small kids. And one of the mothers saw this and just blew a gasket, and threatened to sue the church, sue him. And they finally settled out of court. He had to resign his position at the church and leave the church and everything. We have very strict expectations regarding touch communication. And just like the article in the Huffington Post that came out today, most of what we read and what we hear is to stay away from it. You don't get beyond a handshake in a business setting, in a professional setting. new teachers that are coming out today are taught that you don't touch students. You're better off not touching a student. Stay away from that because of those strict rules, those strict expectations. A handshake in the workplace is about it. Not only is haptics very rule governed, but like most of these types of nonverbal communication, it's extremely contextual. What is okay in some situations absolutely is not okay in other situations. You can get away with it in one situation, but in other situations you absolutely can't. If we're out after class playing football out in the yard out front and the grass, and we have a pickup football game going on and it's a close game and we're really getting into it and we're having fun, and I throw a beautiful pass to William and William catches that pass and we score a touchdown, win the game, and I run up and hug William and slap him on the butt. We won, good job. We're probably okay. But if William comes to class on Monday and I say, William, and run up and hug him and slap him on the butt, probably not okay. William's going to lay me out. Probably not okay. What's okay in some situations, absolutely not appropriate, not okay in other situations. So as an effective communicator, we have to understand these strict expectations, these strict rules and what's appropriate. And some people have trouble with that. We talked about the huggers yesterday, the people that hug everybody they see. And sometimes that's uncomfortable and awkward in other situations. Appropriate at church, appropriate when you see a friend, but some strangers are really surprised and taken back by that. So haptics is sometimes called tactile communication. It is very rule governed, very contextual. Have you, in psychology class, I know they cover this a lot when I was a student. Did you ever study the monkeys where they take the baby monkeys away from the mother, and one of the baby monkeys has no mother at all? One of them gets like a stuffed animal monkey. One of them gets a wire monkey. Have you ever seen that study? And one of them gets they keep one of the monkeys with the mother. And studies like this show that we have a need for touch feel. It stunted the growth of the monkeys. They didn't grow mentally or physically. They've done a lot of study with what they call feral children. Feral child. Have you ever heard that term before?
Yeah, I've seen it.
What are we talking about?
It's where they're raised up without any communication.
Right. They're raised up without any interaction or communication with other people. There's all kinds of legends and stories about feral children. Tarzan was a feral child. There's one famous back in the 60s or 70s, and I lost his name, they found out in the woods that was raised away from people. Recently, within the last few years, they found a girl in an old school bus out in the desert, New Mexico or Arizona or someplace, that somehow survived alone away from people. The most recent that I read was in Chicago, and this has only been a couple of years ago. There were two situations within the last few years. One, there was a girl that was chained to a toilet in the bathroom, and they fed her under the door, never talked to her. She drank out of the toilet. You remember that? It's been within the last few years. And then in Chicago, just a couple of years ago, they found there were like 4 or 5 kids that were in wooden crates in the basement. And it was dark, they couldn't see each other, they couldn't talk to each other, they threw food in through the slats of the crate, had no human interaction. And what they found out with studying these feral children is that they have a very difficult time mentally. They don't develop properly, both mentally and physically. It stunts their growth, both mentally and physically. I did see a report on 60 Minutes last year that was an exception to the rule, and it might have been the girl that was in the school bus. And they did a like a 60 Minutes story on this girl, and it showed her when her new parents adopted her, and she was like an animal. She growled, she would snap at them, she would try and scratch them, had no interaction, communication skills with them at all. And the family, this couple that adopted her, talked about how everyone just thought they were crazy and you need to put her in a mental institution and you need to do this and you need to do that. And the 60 Minutes story ended with her graduating from high school. She was valedictorian in her high school. What the experts were saying, what the doctors were saying, is that this young couple got her early enough in her development and didn't give up on her, worked with her and stayed with her. And part of that therapy was they held her hours during the day. One of either mom or dad would be holding her as they're reading to her, as they're feeding her, talking to her, just sitting, watching TV. They held her. And they talked about how important that touch relationship was to her growth and to development. So there's some exception to that feral child idea that they'll never be normal. If you can get to them early enough in their development, they can grow and live a normal lifestyle. Haptics, tactile communication, very rule-governed, very contextual. Number 7 on our list is artifactual communication. Artifactual communication. Any idea how we communicate through artifactual communication? What word do you see in there? Artifacts? Let me help you out a little bit. Some textbooks refer to it as objectics. Does that help, Danny? What word do you see in there? Objects, yeah. Artifactual communication is communicating through the objects that we have around you, that we keep around us, the accessories that we have. Under artifactual communication, most of the attention goes to clothing, is a type of artifactual communication, jewelry, shoes, stuff that you have around your body, things, objects that you have around your body. So your really cool book bag would be artifactual communication or objectics. The hat that you wear would be artifactual communication, objective. Yes, yeah, it would be within territoriality. How you arrange that office and decorate that office would be territoriality. But certainly if I walked in to your office and saw, you know, I've got a Sheldon Cooper stress doll and different things in my office, that would communicate something to you. Or if I went out in the parking lot right now and looked in the back seat of your car at the objects, at the things that you have there, that would be artifactual communication. The things that you have around you. Jewelry gets a lot of attention. Now phones that people have, there's so many different types and styles, and getting the latest phone, that communicates messages to people. Several years ago, I think I was flying up to see my mom and dad in Michigan. I must have been, because I landed in Chicago, but I didn't get out of the plane. We landed and some passengers got out and new passengers came in Chicago, and I stayed on the plane, and a guy in a business suit, real formal looking business suit, gets on the plane, sits down in the seat next to me, pulls out the tray, works on his laptop for a little bit. Middle of the flight, he closes up his laptop and looks over at me and says, "So, how long have you been a scuba diver?" I said, "What?" And he said, "Scuba diver. How long have you been a scuba diver?" I said, "I'm not a scuba diver." He said, "Oh, I saw your watch." And I had on a waterproof watch that I got it right before our honeymoon, because we were going to the beach, we were going to the ocean, and I wanted a watch that I could wear in the water. But he saw that watch, and from that watch determined that I was a scuba diver. That's artifactual communication. Remember we talked about miscommunication and misunderstanding yesterday? He saw that watch, and from that watch got the message that I was a scuba diver. That's artifactual communication. It's also an example of miscommunication and misunderstanding. I Thought that was pretty crazy. Thought that was pretty weird. Couple of years later, I'm in the drive-thru down at Citizens Bank, and I'm in the middle lane, and I'm waiting for them to send my money over, and I've got my hand on the window like this, and I look over, and there's a cop car in the left lane. And this cop car, I can see the guy in there, I can see the cop in there, and he's looking at me. And he's got a car in front of him, that car pulls away, he pulls slowly up next to me, and rolls his passenger window down. And he leans out and he says, "So, how long you been a scuba diver?" I thought, oh my gosh. I had that same watch on. 2 years later, it communicated that same message. That's artifactual communication, objectives. So shoes, clothing, jewelry that you wear, any kind of object, even like these cups now that are real popular. People getting all kinds of cups. My wife works at the preschool, and at the end of the year this year, that was the thing to give the preschool teacher. She must have gotten 25 of these different cups from different places, the thermal cups that you screw on the lids and everything. That's real trendy now. That would be a type of artifactual communication or objectives. Okay? Artifacts, that's where the word comes from. Okay, number 7 on the list. I have asked Dr. Mike to come in. Let me introduce Dr. Mike Searcy to you. I told him that I had a classroom full of students that were interested in taking public speaking class just as soon as they possibly can. Dr. Mike teaches, and I wanted to introduce you to him. Dr. Mike's around this summer. He's one of the communication instructors in our program and teaches public speaking. So I wanted you to see that he's real and not a monster. And does a good job. So if you have questions about public speaking, Dr. Mike will be around this summer. You can talk to him about it if you have any questions. As I said, the first day, if you transfer to a 4-year school, university, you typically will need at least 6 hours of oral communication. This class will count as 3 of those hours. A lot of the majors, we just talked to Western yesterday about the engineering degree. They want public speaking. If you're getting an engineering degree, you have to have public speaking. Every agreement that I've worked on since I've been associate dean with Campbellsville, with Western, with Eastern, with Union, every one of those colleges, did I say Eastern? Eastern was another, has wanted public speaking. So I hope after this class you see that it's not awful, it's not terrible, and will be interested in taking public speaking. I always tell my advisees, if you're going to have it, take it here where you have 15 people in the class or 17 people in the class. Don't wait until you get to UK or Eastern when you have 75 people in the class. It's a lot easier to get that requirement out of the way here than it is to wait and take it at the university. Any questions for Dr. Mike while he's here about that course? Take advantage of the
Well,
funny you should ask that.
Go.
I have, recently we just put public speaking online. And that particular course, in fact, I'm teaching it only next semester online. I am. Although there are other communication teachers who are teaching it face-to-face in the classroom. And, you know, before I go into that specifically, let me just kind of address something that John just said. I wasn't sure until you started talking whether I was coming in to introduce myself as the new associate dean for next year or...
I told Mike yesterday, after class yesterday, that I was ready to go back in the classroom and let him take over as associate dean.
But that particular course, when he talks about doing public speaking at the local community college, great advice. Why? I used to teach public speaking at the University of Illinois. I was on faculty at the University of Illinois. And when I was there, I had 5 teaching assistants that were graduate students hoping to get their master's degree in communication. And when I was teaching public speaking, I'd walk in there 1 day a week, I had 120 students in the room. I'd give a lecture about how to get up and give a presentation, and then the second day they'd split up in groups of 20 with each of those teaching assistants. True story. I couldn't tell you half the people, I couldn't tell you a tenth of the people by name who was in that class. Because when they gave the speeches, they gave the speeches to the TAs in the class. You're much better off getting that attention that you can get here that you just won't get at the larger colleges. I am not making any claim as to what Western and Eastern and UK, what they do. All I can tell you is what my experience was when I was teaching in that particular situation. So now back to your question. We have some of our faculty do teach the public speaking course online, face-to-face. I teach it online. And when I teach it online, what you get is essentially an opportunity to take advantage of these, artifactual pieces, right? Nobody's got their smartphones out. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I was looking around going to go, see, but nobody's actually got them out on their desk going, hey, I'm going to have that there just so I can keep tabs on this because it's more interesting than class. So that says a lot for the attention that John is able to capture in this room. Because, we're not really dumb when it comes to us as teachers. We know exactly what you're doing when your smartphones are all sitting at your desks. And so it's really amazing to see now one of them. That's great. That course is taught, you can use your smartphones because the camera technology has gotten that good. You do have to find, now, you're going to be responsible for 4 speeches, 1 of them in the first week. That's what I'm going to call your web broadcasting opportunity. I don't care what kind of camera you use, even if it's the camera that's right on the computer. You're going to basically create the YouTube channel, which is simple. I give you step-by-step recipe instructions. Follow these steps. You can put it together. We're going to show you how to put unlisted videos up. Unlisted videos basically means it's not open to the public. You need to send me the link or I'll never see it. And after the class is over, you can take the videos down if you have a problem with them being up there. But they're not open to the public. And we're also going to show you then how to record and upload a video. You're going to upload a video basically telling me a couple of things, proving a couple of things to the first week that you can actually handle that kind of technology. And most of us, if we come from the generation X, Y, or Z generations nowadays, this technology is nothing for us. And at this point, you can take advantage of it. And really, if you don't know how to use that technology, ask your 3rd grader. and they can help you with it. Then you can then essentially you're going to record your next 3 speeches. There's only 4 required. You're going to record your next 3 speeches that way. With that, you're going to upload it to YouTube. The only catch that people have a tendency to kind of get caught up on is I do require you to find 10 non-related adults to sit in your audience 3 times.
A lot of people will use like their Sunday school class or a club that they belong to or any kind of group or organization. And we've seen some people ask other classes, hey, would you stay after for a little bit so I can give a speech and do it that way. But to get that public speaking requirement in there, we have to have an audience. You have to have a public. So that... What's that?
Can you just be the audience?
Explain the difference.
There is a difference in the skill set, even if you want to call it an emotional skill set, between getting up in front of a camera, which I can do this now how many times until I get it just right. That's my cell phone too. And I can do that as many times as I need to in order to prepare it. Well, that's web broadcasting. That's a completely different skill set, especially for those of us that have grown up in the United States where, every time they do the survey, what are the 2 greatest fears we keep facing? People's greatest fears, the survey, public speaking, and what's the other greatest fear?
Death.
Death. And it doesn't really matter. I mean, those 2 don't come into play unless you're actually asked to give your own eulogy. However, when we are looking at the idea of getting up in front of a group of people and they're all looking at me, somehow we've been trained in this culture that that is supposed to be a cause of anxiety. Why that is exactly, I don't know. And I do have my theories, and we're going to talk about that specifically in the course. But it's those skills we want you to master, not the, can I do this how many times in front of a camera? So, public speaking requires a public, and until our accreditation agency that oversees our college's accreditation says public speaking and web broadcasting are the exact same parallel skills, go for it. We've really got to pay attention to the integrity of that system.
And this is pretty cutting edge stuff. We just started this online speaking because that was the holdback. how do you add a public to this? How do you make this an oral communications class? And Mike has come up with some software, found some software working with one of our publishers that is really nifty stuff, and you're learning something. We talked yesterday about public speaking and how you're never going to get better unless you're giving speeches. Well, this software, the technology now, allows us to do that, and we can put the course online. So if you have questions about the course,
What's that?
Are you as cool as John?
Am I as cool? I'm cooler.
Oh.
much cooler.
Much,
Do you
much
offer
cooler.
it like in class too, or just you just don't?
I don't offer it in classroom. However, one of the things that I've been toying with and planning on doing, quite frankly, for either the summer course, which is starting June 16th, or the fall, is the idea that, now, are you recording?